Welcome back to the Blazor Server in-depth course. In this lesson, we're going to be deploying to an Azure web app. Now, I really like this setting because it's easy to use Azure, I feel, once you get used to it, and it's kind of integrated right with Visual Studio. So let's see how to do this. So we create a new project, Blazor app. We'll call it Blazor app, and we'll call this Azure Deploy Demo. Hit create. Keep all the settings the same. Hit create. And then once we're in here, let's change that one page. So index hello from an Azure web app. We hit save. And now we're about ready to publish. But before we do, let's create our Azure web app. Now we don't have to do it this way. We can, in the publish, and we'll see this in a minute, we can create the Azure web app right there. The problem is I find it's a little easier to cause problems that way because it's a little easier to miss which settings are necessary to change in order to put it on the right plan in order to get it for free. Because an Azure web app is free if you use the right one. So here's my Azure dashboard. I'm going to create a resource. I'm going to create an Azure web app right here. Click on web app. And then inside here, I'm going to select my resource group, which I'll choose. I'm actually going to choose to create a resource group, and I'll delete this afterwards. So for demo purposes, create a resource group. That's just for that. So Azure Deploy. Okay. We're going to hit OK. So resource groups are free. It's just a bucket that you throw everything into. So it associates everything together. So our web app name, this has to be unique across all of Azure because notice the .azurewebsites.net, this is a subdomain for all of Azure. So probably things like Azure demo app are probably taken. It is. Okay. So I can say Timco Azure Demo, and that's not taken. Notice the green check mark. So we'll just go into the Timco name, and that way we're sure that, or we're more assured of having a name that works. We're going to choose code, and the runtime stack is going to be .NET Core 3.1 LTS, which means long-term supported. And we can deploy to Linux or Windows. I'm going to choose to do Linux. And I'm going to choose to do, let's leave it in Central US. That's fine. And then I need to choose a plan or create a plan. Okay? Which right now it's got a new plan name by default. I can give it my own plan name. So web or Azure Deploy Demo Plan. Okay, which we don't have, so we'll have to create a new one to say that. Oops, there we go. Azure Demo Deploy Plan. Hit OK. But now we have to, this is very, very important. We have to change the SKU and the size. Because right now, it's defaulting to Premium V2 P1 V2. What does that mean? It means a lot of money. Hit change size, and you'll see what I mean. Right now, it's $81 a month. And while I'd recommend this for a production application where, for example, you have custom SSL, auto scaling, staging slots, daily backups, more memory, more disk storage, this is a really great plan, but it's not for development. Okay, so let's go to dev/test. And notice the F1 plan, which is an orange. This is the free plan. You get 60 minutes per day of compute. That doesn't mean your application runs for 60 minutes. It means that if it's doing any work, that starts counting against your 60 minutes. Don't worry, you almost certainly won't run out of time if you're using this as a demo. If you're trying to use this in production, yes, you'll run out of time. This is not for production. This is for dev/test. But this is a great place to start. It's free. It's free for life. You get up to 10 of these, I believe, on your Azure account for free for life. So we're going to choose this, and we're going to hit apply. So now this is the free plan, okay? And that's the big deal I want to make sure I point out is that SKU and size. Make sure it's correct. I'm going to hit review and create. And this just verifies the information about my site. And I get an error. Let's see what the error says. Aha, cannot create a Linux app service plan because there's a limit of one free tier Linux app service plan per subscription. That just means that I've already created a free Linux plan. Okay. Now, if I go back and go previous and previous over here, I could change this to be a Windows plan potentially. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this just for me. This is not for you to do. Okay. This is for me because I'm going to do a demo. I've already done the free plan. It's out there somewhere. I don't want to disrupt that. I'm going to hit change size and I'm going to actually pay for this. All right. To be a little bit more computing power that I have access to, I will have access to put a custom domain on here and manually scale it. I'm not going to do that because that would not be included in the free plan. Okay, so we're going to hit apply here. So I am going to pay for this, but you shouldn't have to. Use the F1 free plan. Now I probably could find, you know what? I'm going to find it because I want to make sure it's apples to apples. So this is the name we're going to use. I'm going to cancel out of all of this and go find my free plan. So I actually paused the video, went and found it because I don't want to drag you around as I do this. So let's start over. And this time I'll use the free plan I already have in existence. So web app, I'm going to choose my resource group of Azure Deploy, which was created already for me. And then I'm going to hit paste here to create that site. I want this to be a .NET Core 3.1 Linux in, and this is important here, East US 2. For me, it's important because I've already created that plan in East US 2. Notice Timco App Service Plan F1 is now an option. I could create a new one, but that would again mean I have to create a different one than free. But since I already have this plan in place, I can add one more site to it. So this is the free plan. Now I can hit create. And this will start the creation process of my site. It may take a few minutes to create. Once it's done, it will tell you, hey, I'm done. And once it's done, you get something like this. Now, also note the little bell icon here. This is really nice. I click on this and it says, hey, pin that to the dashboard. And yes, I want to do that. So now I can go to the dashboard. And on the dashboard, I have my Timco Azure demo .azure web app websites.net. If I click on that, I'll get the default site, which is just a generic placeholder. And there we go. So there's our generic placeholder. We'll remember that. We'll actually leave this open. Now let's go back to our web app. We're going to right click on Blazor app and say publish. This time we're going to choose App Service or App Service Linux. The App Service Linux is actually for Linux Docker containers. That's not what we want. We want App Service. And we're going to select existing. Okay, we can hit advanced here and check to see if all our settings are correct. We're going to do .NET Core or ASP.NET Core 3.1 framework dependent because it already has it on Azure. And our file publish, we'll leave that alone. So we hit create profile. And now it goes, okay, let me look up your information about what you have on Azure. And then let's see what we can do to find your site. Okay, so it's actually not going to find it because it is a Linux container. It's not finding it here. This is why you can have a little bit of a problem sometimes going through this. Let's go back and we're going to choose Linux and see if, even though it says containers, if we can get this to work. All right, there we go. Azure Deploy, Timco Azure Demo. So it says Linux containers, but even though it says that, it means it can also publish to a web app. We hit OK. It's going to prepare a profile for us. Let's hit the little pencil icon to make sure it's release, Net Core App 3.1, framework dependent, and we're going to not remove additional files at location right now. Okay, we'll hit save. And the really cool thing is down here at the bottom it says your application is making use of SignalR. For environments that need to scale, which means get a lot larger, we strongly recommend adding a dependency on Azure SignalR service, which will allow us to scale our SignalR service independent of our website, which is a really cool thing. But we're not going to do that. We're just going to leave it like this. We're just working on getting it published for now. One of the things that often is a mistake is trying to plan for 1 billion users to use your application before you have one willing to actually use it. Okay? So there's a balance there where you want to be prepared to scale, but don't try and make everything fully scalable out front, because you're going to spend a lot of time, resources, and make it confusing to deploy when you don't have any users at all. So now this is all set up. Let's hit publish. This is going to build our app, and then it's going to transfer those files up to Azure. Okay, so now let's transfer the files. And we get this message. We've detected that your app makes use of SignalR, but we've not detected an instance of Azure SignalR service. For performance and scaling, we want you to use that. But if you decide not to, we recommend enabling WebSockets on your Azure App Service as an alternative. That's going to be necessary to use SignalR. So you want to turn WebSockets on? Well, yes, we do. Hit yes. And now we're going to be able to, hopefully, we refresh this page, it should bring up our Azure web app. There we go. So you have the counter. We can click the values, they change. We go to fetch data, it fetches the data. It's not going to be quite as responsive as our other web host situations are because we're using the free tier. Okay, but otherwise, this thing runs exactly the way we expect it to. All right. Okay, so with that, let's shut this down, and that's how you publish to an Azure web app. Really, there's not a lot to it once you have your Azure web app set up. You just connect to it and you publish. Okay, and it even turns on the settings it needs to for things like the web sockets. Now let's see where those web sockets are so you can do it manually, just in case you need to. So this is our dashboard for our Azure web app. And we can go down here to configuration. And this is also where we can put connection strings. So if I put a connection string, this will override what's in our app-settings.json, just like our web host did in the previous lesson. Okay, so this again is a place where you could put your connection strings for your production application, and then you wouldn't have to store those in your source control, which is a big no-no. Okay, now if we go over to general settings, you'll notice we're on .NET Core 3.1. The minor version is 3.1.0, and down here WebSockets are turned on. Okay, so that's where our SignalR is. That's what it's using as WebSockets. Now, this right here is a feature that you'd want to turn on for a production website that you want anybody to use, really. So any production website. Always on allows your site to not time out or idle out due to inactivity. So what's going to happen with our site is it's going to shut down if it's not being used. And then that startup time is a little longer, which is why the first time you go to the website, it's going to be a little slow. You'd want to turn this to on, but you have to do that in a paid plan. And there are other settings in here that we'd like to turn on. Occasionally, you might want to do remote debugging. Again, our runtime stack does not support that. That's Linux. So Windows supports that, Linux does not. That'd be something you'd want to think about or try out in different ways. So there's other things in here, SSL certificates we can't turn on, and we can't override the domain name. have at your company and much more scalable. Okay? So that's it. Thanks for watching. Come on back for the next lesson where we kind of wrap up this section and we talk about how to do a little bit more with deployment in our homework.